This episode is all about building an indie development team. Indie Innovators is a podcast dedicated to independent video game development designed for aspiring and solo game developers. I'm Spencer Koroll.
And I'm James Smith.
And our show provides industry insights, expert interviews, and practical advice on navigating the challenges of creating a game from the ground up. Some key topics we've covered in past episodes were rapid game design, sprint planning, dealing with scope creep. We talked about that a lot. And links for all of those can be found in the episode's description. And you can catch our episodes or become part of the community on platforms such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or even Discord. And if you're an aspiring game developer, hello.
Hello.
So James, building an indie team. It sounds pretty simple. It should be an easy process, right?
Yeah, it's finding the right squad.
Before we recorded the episode, I went through and tried to find like an indie teams looking for people through the regular process that I would go through looking for a normal job, and I couldn't find anything there.
Yeah, it depends on your where you're coming from at it, or coming towards us as, I guess, right? So if you're like you said, you're trying to find team members, you're trying to find other experienced people. Yeah, there's not a lot of job boards. There's not a lot of places out there where you could say, not like Reddit, which this isn't a great place to do this, but to go to the I need a team thread, right, and be like, I need a like, that's not great. Why? Because you're being exposed to the mass, subconscious that is Reddit in that case.
When we graduated, that's where I found a couple small projects to join, and guess what? None of them went anywhere.
Yeah, and this is that bridge we all got to cross when we're becoming a professional, right? In the space, Reddit is really not a great professional resource unless it's a very specific community that is curated, and a lot of those don't exist anymore because Reddit's just not great for that kind of stuff.
Although if anybody did have success through Reddit, let us know and tell us how it
went. prove me wrong. Yeah, and other professional wise, there are some specialized job boards like workwithindies.com, right? And that's all, well, you get larger scope projects on there as well with funding, but a lot of them are indies that do have a bit of funding that are looking to hire people. But now you're not really an indie looking for like, I want to build my first game, my first serious game. Like that's, hey, I have a background in games. I've worked on games. I have a bunch of experience. I want to work with the studio, right? But
so that's typically for like studios and people with experience?
It doesn't rule you out if you don't have that, but it's certainly targeted towards that audience. The other people who you'd be competing for a spot on a team are those people. Are the people who just got laid off from big studios, people who are tired from the larger studios.
There's a lot of those, unfortunately, right now,
especially this year. But yeah, that's who you're going to be competing with in a space like that, because they're not going to indie, they're going to specialized resources, off to getting their name shared and behind closed doors, stuff like that. So yeah, it is tough. Now, where you have to go for that kind of stuff are the communities, right? Specific curated communities, like I mentioned. And those look like your game dev groups, your communities where people are part of indie developer groups, whether that's on LinkedIn, there's Facebook groups, there's pretty much any place where you can have some sort of community page. You will find a game dev group. It's just a matter of going there, seeing what everybody is talking about. What are like, I want to say the culture, right? Who's working there? What kind of stuff are they into? You're going to find groups that indies will talk about AI game development is great. And then you'll find other groups which are very, very against it. And then, so there's a big spectrum there. And so you have to join the communities. You have to prove that you belong there sometimes. Sometimes that's just showing little gifts of your little hobby projects or whatnot, just to get entry. And then you have to figure out, okay, what kind of community is this? Is this full of people where I feel like I get along mentally with a lot of these people? We all end up with the same ideas and we're chatting, and you have to engage. This is the part that people really miss. You have to engage with the people, and you can find people that way to build a team.
My gut instinct when you talk about some of that is it feels like it's like gatekeeping, where it's like people are trying to create these close-knit groups, but I'm sure it comes down more to just all of the bots and people that want to join these things so they can just spam links to their own stuff to get their own coverage. And so that's probably just things people have done just to make their community feel more like a community and not just a soundboard for the random trash out there.
Yeah, right. And the other part of it too is the idea guy, right? And the idea guy always gets lots of hate, but there's a reason for that. It's because the idea guy is the easiest role to fill, but it's the hardest to execute properly, I would argue as well. So you get a lot of people coming in being like, this is my idea for a Skyrim something that's amazing and it's going to take 2 years and we'll get funding 100% if I can get a full team. Like, come on board. Like, it's all free, but we're going to get funding for sure. And like, I've seen thousands of those posts. Like, they're everywhere. And so, yeah, that's what the curation is for. That's why you want to join a community where that kind of stuff isn't necessarily frowned against, but it's just not allowed. Like, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear your pitch from somebody who's never worked in games before, never worked in software development in general or any kind of adjacent field. There's nothing wrong with wanting to practice and get in and learn, but those are very different perspectives, right? Coming in being eager and interested and hungry versus coming in and being like, here's my idea. I just need someone to build it for me and also show me what to do and also listen to me, right? Like those,
and
those are
also
not the
make
same
me all
thing.
the money.
And make me all the money. Yeah, right. Very, very different.
So then what do I need then to step into this?
You need some sort of resume or portfolio or proof. Right. And that's really easy to do. It's not a big barrier that everybody thinks it
The
is.
proof part feels like it'd be a little bit more challenging than the others because anybody can write. Well, I guess resumes can be kind of challenging at first until you get an idea of how to write them.
Well, the resume is more work experience is probably a better way for me to put it. Work experience, you have to show that you have some sort of working exposure for making games, for making user interface, for making art, something that shows that you've been exposed to the professional side. But it's also not necessary. Right. You can go watch a bunch of YouTube tutorials and then put them into practice or Udemy or Masterclass or something, some kind of educational resource. And you can show what you have done based off of what you have learned. And that qualifies you enough to show you put in the time and the effort to learn these skills, you could belong here because indie games, right? We're not looking for specialists per se.
So proof doesn't have to be previous work. It doesn't have to be actually shipping a game. Proof can be just, here, I guess a demo reel might even be the easiest way to prove. It's just like a demonstration of here's something that I've created, essentially.
Yeah, right. I took a system, I took a mechanic, I built it, I compiled it. Here's a demo. It's like 10 minutes long. That doesn't matter. It's the fact that you went through all those steps, player input, user interface. Even if it's bad, you at least have that exposure, right? And when you're trying to join a team member, somebody, just for example, if there's a senior out there who wants to spin up a prototype, doesn't have a budget, but he's willing to teach people in exchange for their time and effort to build the things he's like building out, that's a perfect exchange. You can show up and say, I want to learn, show me what to do. And as long as you're listening to them and you're trying to take the advice, you're trying to learn how the process works, you'll end up with something that you can ideally show. And even if you can't, let's say there's an NDA, right? And it's super hush hush. You can't show that stuff. You can still talk about what you learn. Once you understand code inheritance, you can talk about code inheritance with another coder or somebody who is like code adjacent, and they'll understand what you're talking about. And it demonstrates you understand that concept, right? So having that exposure, having that work experience is very valid. It's not a barrier to have never released a game. My own studio has never technically released a game. Anything that we have done that has made it to release, yeah, we are under NDA where we can't do it. But that's because my company was a white label. It's different. It's different, right? But that's not how our studio gets work. Our studio gets work through competency. And we demonstrate that in conversation. We demonstrate that in breaking down a problem that somebody comes to us with and says, for instance, we don't understand this animation system. This is what we're working with. This is what we want it to do. And then that's where we kind of flex a little bit and say, oh, okay, well, XYZ, right? This ABC. Here's the steps. Here's the breakdown. Here's what you're thinking about, what you're not. And that's why we get hired. you could do the same thing, even as an indie, even as a junior, even as somebody who's never worked in games before. But you have to understand what you're talking about.
So then it feels like joining these communities and engaging with them is a great way to like talk with people about, the things that we know, but it might also be a great way to figure out what it is that we're missing or that we don't understand. Because if I join one of these developer or these game developer groups and they're talking about all this, like, I don't know enough about this stuff, so I'll just say like C#, and they're talking about like this crazy thing that this needs to be done in this one engine, and I've never heard about it, and now it's like, okay, this is an opportunity where I can now go and learn about something that's really important that I wouldn't have known about otherwise that could potentially be helpful in wherever it is that I'm trying to find work.
And if you're in that community where something comes up like that and you're like, hey, I should go look that up, ask. Just don't be a dick about it, right? Just say, hey, I'm new, I haven't encountered that before. Why is that an issue? I'm just curious. It gets you engaged, right? People could see that, like, you saw it, you want to know more about it. Guaranteed there's somebody there who's probably going to answer you. Now, what I often hear from a lot of juniors and other people reaching out is nobody answers me. Nobody answers my question. Nobody helps me solve my problems. You're not asking properly. Right? The amount of times I get sent a screenshot and being asked, why isn't my code compiling? And I'm like, I don't know. How many interfaces do you have connected? How many different inheritances are set up? What is the context of this function in the rest of your graph? Not just this one little function, because there's a lot of reasons why there could be a bug in your code. So the reason nobody is answering you is because there's no way for anybody to answer you. But if you were to copy out all your code, save it in a text file format, and then upload that as a file and say, here's my code, this is my problem, here's a footage that I captured that's just on a Google Drive, I don't really know what I should be looking for, is very different than this doesn't work, help me, right? It's like the expectation there as well. You have to leave a door open so somebody can come in and say, okay, well, I looked at this stuff. It's not really clear, but I could tell from their video that this is what's happening, right? And you could take that a step further as a person asking for help by saying, this is what I am attempting to do. This is how far I've gotten, right? But often that's not the case. And if you have spent any amount of time in any of the developer communities, especially the ones that are open to indies and juniors, right? A lot of what you get is a screenshot of like 3 little nodes that says this doesn't work, and it's in the context of
a screenshot of a character walk. He's like, my attack isn't happening.
Yeah, right. Like that happens. That's like 90% of all the posts are like that, where it's not enough information. People forget there's so much context around a game that everyone else just doesn't have. So you have to make it simple when you're asking.
That also feels like a great learning opportunity, where just going and looking at other people's questions that they've asked, and then you don't have to answer the questions, but just look at what do you think's missing from their question that would have made answering it easier.
I wish I could remember where I read this, which resource it is. I can't remember. If somebody knows, please comment somewhere on one of our channels so it's everyone can read it. But if there's like a saying or whatever, right? Like a way to think about this is, if you look at your problem and you cannot accurately diagnose what the problem is, you fundamentally lack the understanding of the topic at large in the first place. So before you go asking or trying to diagnose the problem, you need to go study the concept a little more. You have to go study it a little. I'm paraphrasing this terribly, but the idea is,
yeah, that 100% makes sense.
Yeah, right. If I can't accurately describe to you why my book is falling apart, I don't understand enough about how to bind a book together to even tell you what the problem is. So I need to spend the time to go learn about book binding before I can come back to you and say, I'm running into this issue with this glue using this method. I don't really understand what's happening. You just provide so much more context, right? You have techniques, you have process, and you don't have to dive into them. You just mention it. And the people who understand those things will instantly be able to piece together what you're doing. So it becomes much easier to describe what you're doing. And there's a really interesting thing that happens there in like the thought process around like competency, right? Is because I recognized I did not understand the problem well enough to describe what the problem was, and I went to go learn stuff. When I come back to the problem, I probably have the education I need now, right? The knowledge now to solve my problem in the now, right? Whereas before I didn't. And the reason why you're getting ghosted is because you are relying on somebody else to just give you the problem, but they can't even diagnose the problem either, right? Like you see that paradox there, and I see that all the time. I'm on, I can't even tell you how many servers, different servers of developer servers, YouTuber servers, things like that, where they have a section for, let's say, expertise, right? Like these are professionals who joined our community, and if you need help, or here's a forum part of our community that where you can ask your questions. And a lot of us who are end up in that category, that group of like mentors, let's say, nobody pings us stuff. Nobody asks us things. And that's okay. I don't really want to be pinged by everybody for every little problem. But the majority of us can't even answer anything, even if we wanted to, because there's not enough context. And so now we have to do this round of exactly what I've done here so far in our chat is like, hey, here's how you properly ask. Here's all the steps. Here's how you go through the stuff before you ask your question. And then now, like, I'm doing that for every single person who's posting, right? That's why you get ghosted. Again, I can't remember where I ever heard this before or read it. I can't even, yeah. Anyway, like, you have to have curiosity in it, right? When you're dealing with people, you ask them stuff with curiosity. Nobody likes small chat, especially anymore, because it's not even small chat anymore. It's just sunny outside. Yeah, it is. What do I do with that? How do we continue the conversation forward? Right? It's the same kind of thing. You have to ask your questions with curiosity, like you want to learn what the problem is, but not just want to learn the result. Right?
So ask it so that we're asking a question in a way that shows we want to learn what the answer is, not that we just want them to give us the answers that we no longer have the problem.
Mm-hmm. You want to know a really good question that I would almost always reply to if I see it? I'm having this issue, but I want to know how to actually diagnose it. I'm having a problem. How do I actually go about figuring out what this problem is? You're asking how to debug, basically. If somebody goes on the forum and they're like, I'm having this weird problem, but I'm not quite sure how to figure out where or why this is happening. Yes, I'm in there. Why? Because now I can teach you something that you want to learn, right? Versus me coming to you and be like, add all this context. Think about the problem. And that's not what you want to hear. What you want to hear is click this button, move this node. Now your code works. Congrats, go build your game. That's what people are looking for. But that's not what you want in a team member, right? What you want in a team member is the person who's asking, how do I do this? What's the best way to go about figuring out how to do this? You want the team member who's going to be like, I obviously don't understand enough here to be asking the right question. Can you tell me more? Can you expand on that? I still don't understand this concept. What does this component have to do with that blueprint? Why do we need it? Like, those are the kinds of people you want because they'll help you build stuff. They'll help ask questions that make you better as a developer. But I digress a bit. That's the kind of mentality that you need to have when you want to join a team that's hopefully going to move on to build a successful title. So that's you as an individual, right? That's your mindset. That's what you have to bring to the table. You have to engage. It's really hard. We're all introverts in the in the digital gaming space, but you got to do it. You got to get out there, right? But now let's talk more about the founder side, right? Like, you're the leader, or you're the person who's trying to build a team. Maybe you're going to start a studio. You want to start a studio. What do you do there? Like, what do you need, right? So, like, the macro scope of all of it together, because there's a ton, but specifically team building, right? You have to analyze your skill gaps. So, am I missing X skills? Am I missing art skills? Am I good on the visual side? Am I good on the audio side? Am I good on the technical side? Do I understand project management? Do I understand, like, what realm does the current team, which often is I myself in that situation, what am I great at and what am I worst at? And what you're worst at is what you need, right? That's the first part of it. The next part of it is, what do you actually need, right? Just because, for argument's sake, if I'm bad at art, that does not mean I need a very talented artist on my team. I can just design and build a game that doesn't rely on art. Now, the actual need of an artist doesn't matter as much. Maybe I want to do something tile based with 2D textures. Now, the requirements for an artist are actually a lot easier to fill, right? Maybe I'm doing a UI based idle clicker game. There's like very little art there that is necessary to build, to get funding, to pitch the game, etc. Right? So do you even need an artist at that point? Arguably, no. Go on Figma and use a template. Here's my icon. I made it a different color and gave it a drop shadow in Photoshop. Exported a texture. I'm done my art. So you have to figure out, what am I missing, but what do I actually need?
Well, this feels like it's going to be helpful to get closer to what you're, not to just say the same thing you're saying, but actually looking for. It's like, if I'm using your example, if I'm making a game and I am not good at art, and then just saying I need an artist, can get you anything. But once I narrow it down to, it's like, okay, so I'm making a 2D platformer. I need these graphics here for this. And if it's just a couple graphics, I don't need an artist. I just need someone to create the art for me, which makes it so I don't have to go and like hire somebody that I'm going to be wasting a bunch of money on because I don't actually have that much for them. Instead, I could go to like Fiverr or somewhere else if it's just like a couple short little graphics, and then I'm saving myself time, myself money, and it's so much easier to find the perfect fit for what I'm looking for too, instead of the just, hey, I need an artist, and then I've got 100 artists that have all reached out to me. Now I got to filter through and decide, is this actually the artist that I want? Where I could have known already what would be the perfect fit.
Yeah, that broad
You're
generalization.
super smart, James.
No, I've just been through the pain, but yeah, that generalization, right? That department skill wide generalization is what makes hiring really difficult in a team, whether that's big AAA, indie studio, game jams. It's really, really hard to figure out what's the good fit, right? So the other thing to think about here is, when I say, what do you actually need? Like, we talked about skills, but we also need to consider timing, right? Are we in the prototyping stage? Your needs for a prototype versus the needs for a vertical slice versus the needs for, alpha beta, they're all different. It is perfectly okay to set your sights a little lower, right? I don't need a perfect artist. I just need somebody who understands what I'm trying to accomplish in the prototype phase, because it's all gray box and raw assets and tinkering and testing, right? By the time we get to a vertical slice, we still, before, that's a big step. First of all, that's a huge step, months, years, depending, right? Before you get to that point, you're going to have a lot of time to figure out, what's our art style? What kind of perspective are we doing? Are we going to shift our entire game's visual point of view for the player in that time because we're still assembling stuff, right? It's okay to not need somebody who does perfect AAA quality, high tech 4K texture characters. You don't need that. You just need somebody who understands how to take a basic character, slap it on a rig, and throw it in a game and give it some janky animations, because that's enough to get started, right? Later, when you get to that point where you've defined the process, you've defined your needs, the person who's been with you all along in that learning phase, they know your system. They know how you work. They know the whole game, more or less, right? Conceptually. Now's the perfect time for them to train up. This is the part people miss out on, is joining really early like that, when it's all this work that's never going to stay. That's not a bad thing. That's a great thing, because by the time you are needing to be able to say, I want to step into this new role to upskill my ability and create these high resolution characters, there's no reason to let that team member go. Just let them learn as you go. Also, if you have to bring in an expert, they can just help train that other person, because that other person knows the pipeline. They know all the game lore. They know all the reasons for the choices that you're trying to make. They're a perfect person to slap with that expert and be like, hey, art guy, meet our art guy. That's your office. If you have any design issues, hit me up. But until you're on board, I don't know how to help you, because I don't have the terminology. I don't have that experience. right? So it's a good way to look at your project is like, what stage are you in? What do I actually need for those skills to come through? Right. And then you have core pillars, right? Use that to filter out who you actually need as well. Only bring on equity partners
So when you
or
say core
core
pillars, what do you mean by core pillars?
the core pillars of your game, of your studio, of your team, right? So sorry, I missed that.
No, it's all good.
But
So this isn't like the core pillars of searching for someone, it's the core pillars of your game.
yeah, you use that as a filter, right? So you take an application, you filter it through your core pillars, like studio and game. You could do both. And if they don't pass that filter, just don't work with them. Just send them a reply being like, sorry, we just don't believe you're a good fit at this time. Best of luck. Like, you don't need much more than that. Replying is always nice, but sometimes it's hard. Anyways, those early team members, right? Especially if you're starting a studio, they're going to want like an equity partner in a fair setup, or if they're just core team members for something that you've set up on your own, you need to make sure that their skills that directly translate to your unique selling points or your core features, your core gameplay. You wouldn't want to hire somebody who is an expert at turn-based tactics, systems, or games or design to work on a third person survival action game, right? It just, they're fundamentally very different. The way the systems work, the way the optimization works, what you
Unless
can get
James
away
that ends
with.
up, breaking in and making the perfect puzzle piece.
Maybe, but you know what? If your game pillars are that you are trying to merge those two worlds, then yes, definitely grab a bit from each pot. But otherwise, most people aren't designing games like that. Most people don't have the skills to design a game like that, even after like 10, 20 years in the industry. Like you get really specialized the longer you're in the industry, right? The more you stay within one scope or one genre. And that's what I'm saying. Just because you came across a senior who has some extra time and they're a wonderful combat designer and they made all these impressive systems does not mean they're a good fit for your cozy game or your strategy game or your simulation game. Like it's fundamentally different. I'm not saying you can't hire them. I'm just saying that the expectation needs to be understood there from both parties, right? Like your expectation is the super experienced person is going to come in and do amazing work. Their expectation is, hey, I'm tired of doing this kind of work. I want to do something new. Well, they're going to be a little rusty. There's a lot of skills and experience they're going to bring to the table, 100%. But that's not going to come through at the same level or quality right away. It's going to take time to ramp that up into this new process, into this new exposure, right? So you have to be understanding of that too. You can't just expect them to come in and all of a sudden you got a bulldozer when it feels like you got a little mule with a plow. Like, right? You have to be aware of that. And if you're okay with that and you understand that, then it's fine. But if your expectation said is we're bringing on this super capable person, you need to understand what that actually translates to in your own project. Because that if they're not what you need and that's not what the expectation you're trying to fill, then that's not somebody you want to hire, no matter how good their pedigree is. Like you're making a platformer, you need a physics programmer, and contract work could cover everything else. That's the other side of this. Maybe you don't need to hire somebody. And you actually already brought this up. There's Fiverr, there's contractors, there's plenty of freelancers out there who are just looking to do small stints on tons of different projects. If you don't actually need someone long term to build and maintain a complicated system, hire a freelancer or a contractor to come in, do what you need done, and then keep going. So that's who you need. That's how you figure that out, right? Does that all make sense?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, cool. So the next step, right? After you've figured that out, it's hiring for the long term or your short sprints. So we've talked a lot about project planning in the past, agile, all that kind of stuff. This is where this comes in handy on the hiring and the team building side of things. If you know a system is going to take a short amount of time to plan out and you only have certain features and tasks that are required for it, bring somebody in to build that one little feature. They don't have to stay for the whole project. There's no reason to hire them for the whole project. Just pay them for their time to get it done, get in, they'll do what they need to do, and then you move on. That's your short burst. Your long haul is the person who's going to maintain that kind of stuff, who's going to know that the designer in 6 months is going to implement a brand new system, and it's very likely that that's going to have like refactor implications across the rest of the game. You need somebody who is competent enough in coding, for example, to be able to handle that refactor, to take those changes as they come. That's something for the long term. It's not great for the short term. But every time you bring in a new contractor to do a small feature and then later down the road something changes and you have to go back to that freelancer and the freelancer's like, I don't even remember you. I've worked on like a dozen projects since I last talked to you. They're not even necessarily going to have the same context for what they made the first time. So you're just asking them to go in and change a system that they don't really remember to get more in line with the current system. Like, it's doable. But that's not exactly, or reliable is not the right word, but it's not the right way to look at it, right? Like, you need one person to maintain, be long term. And it's those people who are the long term hires for your team, they need to be there for a large portion of the game's development, usually most of your core development. And so a lot of the layoffs, games are cyclical, right? You're not needed for the entire production of a game. You're only needed for certain stages or for certain reasons. And then once your scope of work is done, there's no reason for you to be on the team anymore unless you are all like in agreement that we are a studio and we build a certain kind of game. Because the moment that my stint on this project runs out, I just move on to the next project, right? And this is how like outsourcing companies usually work, is like you have a core set of competent people and they just keep jumping from project to project in a cycle. But bigger studios who are building one specific game, once the game design is done, you only need one or two really good designers, usually leads or game directors, to stay. Everyone else gets laid off because you just don't have the work for them. And it's not realistic to say, okay, all the producers who still have jobs, we're going to spin up a brand new project. So on top of managing this project, you're going to manage this project. And that kind of stuff happens a lot. And that's also why project management and producing just falls to pieces, because I don't know, you can't, right? It's really hard to contain two separate realms of project management, like mentally, and keep them accurate, right? So that just doesn't happen. That's why everyone gets laid off, and always in phases. So a good way to figure out what's long-term and short-term is to think about continuous and burst. Programming, project management, that kind of stuff's going to happen every day. Every day, somebody is going to be contributing to that side of it, right? You're likely going to want a partner. You're going to want somebody who's going to be with you through the long term to go through all of that work, because you need somebody to build that context. You need somebody to build that knowledge for your game, that you can always rely on them to be like, hey, do you remember that system and that thing that we had and that bug? We found a use case or we found a fix, and they'll know what you're talking about. The burst stuff is your audio design, your 3D modeling, your art, UI, anything that can be front loaded or back loaded. What I mean by that is like added, right, in different phases. And those kinds of team members are not people you want long term. So in terms of like hiring and building a team, that's freelancer realm. That's somebody you're going to pay for a short amount of work or contract project amount, and then you're done. Everyone else is somebody who you're probably going to have to do rev share or set up staffing agreements or something along those lines. Rev share, for example, just while that I mentioned that, anybody who works in the realm of those burst oriented workloads, you're not going to want to offer them rev share. Not to be mean, not to say that nobody deserves it. Of course, like an audio director, you would want to give them rev share because they're going to be there the whole time. But for your composer who's coming in, or your artist, even just like a UI coder or somebody who has a specialized skill set, you're not going to offer them rev share because they worked on a very small portion of the game. You just want to pay them appropriately for their time that they're here. And then everyone else who's staying long term is getting the rev share. But that leads into a whole different topic, whole different discussion point. So that's all I have to say about that topic. Did I lose you? Does all that make sense?
No, I mean, it makes sense. I think there's a lot of it that's fairly over my head because I've never thought about or considered a lot of that. And I also still don't understand a lot of the steps of game development in general. So it's like, okay. But I mean, I think I understand the core of what you were saying, and it's really just figuring out what it is that you need and how, maybe as well as how much of it that you do need, so that you can figure out what kind of team members you're going to need and for how long you're going to need them. Because it seems like that's a really big really big part of it. I think there's some stories you talked about in the past on some previous episodes where when we were talking about people building teams, and there can be just a lot of big mistakes that come in if you bring people in that either aren't the right fit for the team or the game, or they, you bring them on and now they're just sitting around and they have nothing to do. So they start to, it feels like an easy way for scope creep to come back in because someone's like, well, I finished everything that I have for this game. So now I just get to mess around and tinker with stuff. And then suddenly that's causing problems too. And I feel, because I wouldn't be surprised if that's how a bunch of teams have fallen apart as well, where, three friends come together. They're like, we're making a game. And then this isn't even about like hiring other people, but they all had the things they said that they wanted to do. And just turns out that one of the person's jobs either happens, later on at the end of the game development stage, or, all their work is done early on. And now they're just sitting back while everybody else is working hard. And it's just, if we don't understand everything that we need, and it's as you said, it's like, there's things I need, and then what do I actually need? If we haven't figured that out, that's just going to be a disaster.
No, it's a good way to sum it all up. And there's lots of nuance there too. There's a lot more to this, but
I'm sure it's situational with a lot of it as well, where there's a lot of places where it'll work one way with one team and then won't work another way with another.
Yeah. And if you're looking for proof of like what I'm talking about, this like, what do you need? What do you actually need? How long do you need them? Just look at any games release. Like, you go look at any Ubisoft title and there's like 50 credited people from Ubisoft, maybe one partner. There's a lot more people that worked on that game. Hundreds of people across different outsourcing companies and people overseas in different countries, right? All contributing, working on 2-3 animations each, and then all 4,000 animations end up in your game. Like, that's a lot of people who built that game who are not going to get those first party credits, right?
So how do they decide what... I mean, this is a completely off-topic question, but how do they decide what names go in the credits?
Contract agreements, right? Like white label, right? When we started this, I mentioned how like our studio, Black Hat Creative, is white label. What that means is you pay me more, and I don't claim to have done anything for your project. This is how that works. I don't claim credit. But the cost of that is you get all the, like, this is the trade-off. You get all the renown, all of the prestige, all of the benefit of saying, we made these systems, these games, this art, this, etc. But you paid me more than what you would pay, like above market price, let's say. Right? That's the exchange there. So that's one way, is the contract terms in which, I don't want credit, but you're going to pay for it. Why? Because my whole team deserves higher pay for what we did for you. So do I. So does the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes you don't even want credit for some of the stuff you do. Sometimes you work on something and you're just like, I know the work we did was great, but the rest of it isn't great. So I don't want my name attached to this. That happens a lot, especially in the corporate space, where you're just like, nah, we'll pass on the credits. Pay me. Thank you. Goodbye. We're not going to work with you again. But, your work's out there. You just can't claim it. You can't like go on the internet and be like, I worked on this. Like, you can't do that. And then there's other times where there's stuff that you genuinely cannot talk about. Contracts that I've done for government or military based or corporate that involve corporate secrets, like things that are specific to how a company or an entity does something that would cause harm to their, let's say, their revenue generation or their whatever they're building. If it got exposed, those are also contracts that you could do where, if you worked on the proprietary matchmaking that Activision owns, there's no guarantee that Activision built 100% of that system by themselves. They most likely had somebody contribute to building that system. But because it's so hush-hush and patented and like super, this is ours, you can't claim that either. And you can't talk about it. You can't share it because that's somebody else like owns, right? So like those are 3 very corporate reasons why that kind of stuff will happen. But I forgot what your original question was there. But and so that's where we're going with this. When you look back at why your name might not be included on a project, right? When we
that was the question.
those are all reasons why that might be. There also might be other reasons why too, where they say, look, we don't know you, we don't really have that relationship built, you're not contributing a ton to this game, this game is projected to make X amount of money, the amount of acclaim, right, or reputation you would get is disproportionate for the amount of work you're contributing, is another thing that might happen. So, for instance, if I'm only saying 4 or 5 lines of dialogue, I'm probably not going to get first name credits in the game, because that it would not be fair for me to come along and be like, I voice acted for Halo, like, right? Like, that carries a lot of weight. Just saying that carries a lot of weight, but I can't say that. I did not. Just so we're clear for everybody listening, I
No,
did
but
not do that.
you were using it as an example.
Yeah, right. And so there's that contract terms there where it's like, no, we're not going to add your names to this because that's just not fair. It's not fair to the people who worked tons of overtime, 12, 13 hours a day for years on end. Those people 100% get their names in the credits, right? That's just like one mentality. So there's lots of different reasons. Other reasons can be contractors, right? You don't get your name in there as a contractor, but there's nothing stopping you for fighting for it, advocating for it, saying, hey, I want you to include Black Hat Creative as a development partner, right? In my case, I could argue for that. And it is up for my potential client who I'm negotiating with to fire back and say, yes, we agree, or can we meet in the middle, or no, we're not interested in that. In which case I can come back and with a different term, right? Like it's all about how you approach it. But more often than not, all those examples I laid out are very legal oriented or revenue oriented reasons as to why your name's probably not going to be included. Often a contractor will work for a bigger agency, which is working for a bigger management agency, which is working as the partners for an outsourcing agency, which is working as the partners for the main studio. So there's like 4 or 5 tiers of companies. Not all those people are going to get their names in the credits. Maybe the initial partner, right? Like your Iron Belly, Art Bully, maybe those guys will get their corporate name in the credits. You'll see that at the end of movies, right, where it's like THQ or some big brand has a logo share at the very bottom at the end of the credits. That's how that happens. It's a big corporate partner, but do you have every single THQ or Light and Magic or Adobe Dolby Audio team technicians, like, are all of their names included? No, it's just the company name. So yeah, that's big. It's a big topic and like big side tangent. Yeah, so what do you need? How long do you need them? Where can you find them? Right. So now we're coming back to our initial thing we talked about, which is there's not a lot of good places. It's really the same places, even in the business side. There's actually a lot of people that I've found just in the community who I see asking good questions, being curious, being positive, and I'm like, hey, I like this person's vibe. I'm gonna reach out to them if I have something, right? And yeah, otherwise, networking and forums. It's the same, right? That can all be boiled down into those 2 things that nobody likes doing. Going to shows, going to different community sites, showing up, being like, hey, this is me. This is what I'm doing. What are you doing? Being curious about each other, and building up a rapport just through, developing an acquaintance into something a little bit more solid, not a friendship, but somebody you know. And then over time, that builds into more things. And then maybe you do game jams together and you just build up that relationship. That's the best way and the way I would recommend doing it. You never want to just cold turkey. That's really, really hard. Unless you have like paid work contracts, because you can always rely on the contract to be like, here's the standard of the relationship. Without that, you just have to take everybody at their word. And sometimes it's really hard. But yeah, like forums, Reddit, and I Need a Team, right? They're flooded with hobbyists or people who unfortunately are a bit flaky. They'll vanish when things get boring, like you said, or things are difficult or outside of scope. They leave you hanging a lot of times where they're like, hey, I'm still interested, but I haven't contributed anything for weeks. And I'm just going to like, yeah, I'm not
That's like a
replying
common thing
anymore.
Everywhere. That's just
Everywhere.
people
right?
in general.
It
So
is, unfortunately.
expect to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I've done, yeah. Like even just like making YouTube videos and like YouTube groups and stuff like that. I dealt with that all the time.
Exactly.
It's just the nature of online.
Yeah, making games is hard, right? Making anything is hard. Making games is really hard. So yeah, be prepared to also be ghosted a lot, especially when you're the person looking for the team. But if you want people who will treat game development professionally, right, like a business, you have to go where the professionals look for work, right?
You have to pay them money.
Not always. Sometimes some professionals are in it just for the experience. Sometimes they want to build a connection. I've done that. I've done free work for like AAA experienced devs, 20 plus years for free, just because I wanted the connection, just to be like, yeah, I know that. I helped you out that time. So you know me. I'm on your radar. Like sometimes that can be very valuable, especially in my position. Sometimes you just want to mentor. And what's the best way to get somebody to mentor you is build the stuff they want you to build. Because they'll do it because they have to do it. Like they want you to make their game, so they'll mentor you. But if you're going up to somebody random and saying, hey, I need a mentor. Can you teach me all this stuff? Teach me everything you know about coding, please. I need to be a better code. Like you're just taking and taking and taking. So if you put yourself in a position where they benefit from giving.
But you've also got to be careful with that, because some advice I was given a long time ago is that you can't go into a situation where you're doing work for free with the expectation that they're going to owe you a favor. If you're going to do something for free, you should go in with it should be something where you're either hoping to make a connection with someone or you're learning something out of it yourself, because if you're lucky, 1 out of every 10 people that you assist and help for free, you'll be able to get help back later when you need it.
Yeah. And it's a very good distinction to make, is that I am not advocating for working for free. What I'm advocating for is understanding what payoff you're looking for and whether or not the situation suits that. Just like you have to evaluate that. In the case of like the dev I was talking about, like what benefits me there is for me to be a part on the network radar and say, hey, could you introduce me to this person over here? Well, they know
But
who I
you
am.
also understand and
right?
know that there's a chance that nothing may come from it.
Oh yeah, like 100%.
That's all.
Nothing
That's
could come
very
from it.
important to know.
Yes, right. So that's why I say you have to evaluate and figure out what you want out of it, and understand that it may not pan out, but it also goes vice versa, right? The person who's on that other end doesn't know you're going to be competent at all. You could just be a person with Chat GPT who said all the right stuff, right? Like if there's risks on both sides, but it's just evaluating that, knowing where you're comfortable. Things are not always going to work out, of course, but that's how you can approach that. Anyways, so you don't always have to. Not all professionals are all looking for paid work. Sometimes there's a lot of professionals, especially if they got a decent layoff package, right? A different like severance pay. Some of them are actually looking to genuinely start up a project idea. They're genuinely looking to find people that they click with over an idea so that they can pursue funding. And they got like a 6-month window. They got a 3-month window to just, this is my job now, is to work with you, whether you're part-time or not. We are going to work together because I really want to push this. I want to pursue this because this has been on my mind every day for the last 4.5 years at the big studio. And now I'm not tied down anymore and I'm not sad about it anymore. I want to like tinker on this while I'm looking for work, right? Those kinds of people are not looking to be paid either in that context. They just want to like build something, and they're doing it with the intent of it turning into something serious, right? So that's why I said you have to go to where the professionals look for work. You have to understand that's what those differences are. Now, there's lots of places online, but the best places are to network and forums that are local. Places you can go in person, places that where you'll hop on a Zoom call in person, introduce yourself, see the other person, they get to see you. Yeah, there's a certain level of intimacy that comes with that, where I'm not axthrower69viking@gmail.com or whatever my username is, right? Like random thing, right? It's, hi, I'm James Smith. This is what I do. What do you do? Oh, that's cool. What's something neat you've been doing on? Just hop into a chat in a good professional place where there's people chatting, hanging out in a call while some people are working, some people are gaming, some people are live streaming what they're doing. Just go hang out, chat with people, get to know people. You never know who you're going to run into. You might run into a producer who's just not talking about what they do. They're just like, yeah, no, I'm down after work and I do some project management. And you have no idea. I've run into CEOs of like huge companies and not gaming related, but they're there. They're interested. They have a hobby. They're like, I don't do anything in the company anymore. So this is what I do as I hang out here and learn game dev. And you're like, holy crap. Okay, this is neat. And then you go talk to them and they just like are happy to talk about their experiences. And it's crazy the stuff you can learn in that setting. But again, there's a give and take. You have to be curious. You have to be like, please tell me about your life. Tell me about your experiences. This is different. We're getting into networking territory, but yeah, you have to go network. Be in person is great. Local developer meetups, even if they're in a town over something that's not necessarily really hard for you to get to, are great. That could be local cities. They could be places that are in a couple hours drive where you go spend a night over the weekend and you're going to go hit the local game dev meetup. Go meet people. You never know who's looking for work or looking to meet new people, and you can ask them when you show up. Be like, hey, do you have any? I'm pretty isolated where I'm at. Do you have any great communities that I could join or I could just go check out? Everybody's got a list of resources, right? And if you just ask them and you're a decent person, they'll be like, yeah, go join this server. Or here, what's your handle? I'll add you and then I'll send you a bunch of links. I do that all the time for people. Like, I don't know where to go for work. And I'm like, what's your handle? Okay, I'll invite you on Discord. Just add me, send me as a friend so I can message you. Here you go. Ba, 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 ba. Here's like 6 servers that are all looking for professional services. But I don't do that for everybody. I do that for the people who show up and engage with me and actually show interest. That's a key thing, right? Discord communities are really good. They have become really good, centered around specific topics. So that could be procedural generation. It could be specific kinds of modeling, stylized art, pixel art servers, Unity, Unreal, Godot, all the big engines have their own servers, official or community oriented as well. Platforms like ArtStation, GitHub. Yeah, those are all great places to be looking for talent and to show up as a talent looking for a team, right? And don't just look for the talent. Look at, like with this, speaking from the person trying to build the team perspective here. You want to look for a footprint of completed work. So this is that experience. Have they done game jams? Have they worked with other team members? Have they built systems that are interesting or not even necessarily interesting, but are interesting in terms of implementation? Like, I know implementing a space limited grid based inventory is an interesting thing to build, right? Step by step mechanically. So if you have built that, even if it's following a tutorial, I know you've gone through certain technical hoops to make that work. You understand certain things about UI and around the certain engine you're using. So like that is a footprint of work that is very valid. It doesn't have to be workplace experience. Someone with a history of a lot of game jams, right? Like finishing game jams is way more valuable than somebody who's never actually put anything up there, right? They just have lots of little tinkered experiments. They want to build safe is what that means. But the person who's like, here's my janky crap, eat into the internet and whatever, right? Maybe I keep working on it. That's an even better sign. But like having that confidence to be like, here's my messy crap and like it's out there now. Like if you like it, great. If you don't, also great. Comment, whatever. I'm building the next one. Very different mentality from somebody who's a perfectionist who's like, I have a game idea, but I'm not going to share about it and I don't market it. And it has all these unique features and game design stuff. And, I have it here and maybe I'll bring it in one day and maybe I'll share about it. And like one day once I figure out the cover art, I'll share the cover art. Like I'm trying to show body posture here. Like that's a very closed off person. Those are 2 different people to work with. One who's just very open, it's going to be easier to have conversations. The person who's more perfectionist, maybe reserved, even if they have a stronger skill set, they're going to be harder to work with. They could be very closed off.
Well, somebody who keeps saying like, when I get the cover art, maybe I'll show you and all these different things. It's just the more they say that kind of stuff, the more it makes me think it's like, okay, do they actually even, are they making anything? Do they actually know what they're doing? Are they actually capable of this?
Yeah, you can't tell.
Because that's
right?
a lot of stuff that I would say to people when I first started doing different projects where I had no experience.
Yeah. Right. But that's the difference. And in the local meetups I attend, I love bringing in my crappy prototypes, which are simple. Like you fire a gun and it plays the Unreal compile fail sound. If you've worked in Unreal, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that sound. Like I'll throw that in as a sound effect for my prototype just to show that the audio plays. But I don't care that it's janky. I don't care that it's weird. I don't care that it looks bad. I'm showing you something I'm working on because I want to know, I want your perspective on what am I building? What am I tinkering with? And it takes a certain level of confidence to be able to show up in a professional setting and be like, here's my half formed mutant idea. Hit me, right? Versus somebody who only ever wants to talk about it and won't say anything. It's not to say that they're not skilled. They could be crazy effective people at what they do. But when you're building a team, you need somebody that you can work with, not somebody you have to manage. And unfortunately, that's the difference.